Hello, my name is Rick, and welcome to the first video of my YouTube channel, Living with Paralysis. I decided to do this channel for two reasons. I want to tell my story of my battle with Guillain-Barré, GBS, and the Miller-Fisher variant MFS. I'll be starting at the onset and through my 10-month stay in the hospital, including 9 of those months being on life support. Not only will I be talking about my battle with both these syndromes, but also everything else related to being in the healthcare system. This will include trachs, ventilators, feeding tubes, along with their side effects, all the therapies that I needed. We'll also be talking about how I was treated by the staff, including the good and the bad, the effects on me physically and mentally, and also the effects on my family. I was very fortunate to have an advocate by my side day and night. This was either my wife Teresa, our daughter Wendy, or my youngest sister Deb. But the person who hardly ever left my side was my wife Teresa. Also, I want you to know that my condition doesn't mean that your friend or loved one will end up the same as me. To this day, I am the worst case that my neurologist has seen or heard of. This includes other colleagues of his that he has spoken to about my case. I'm still dealing with some muscle paralysis throughout my body, but it's most pronounced in my face, hands, and feet. I can't walk on my own, and I have very limited use of my hands. This is going to be part one of my story. I'll be trying to keep my videos to around 30 minutes or less. I have a lot to cover and don't want to leave anything out. The second reason for my channel is that I will be doing videos on how I'm actually living with paralysis. This will include things that I've done and I'm doing around the house, making things easier for my wife and myself, including a little more freedom for both of us. I would say because of my wife in handyman that I'm doing things today that most people in my condition would never even think about. I will be doing this video on a range of things, including power wheelchairs, custom lifts, how I get on and off my compact tractor, along with the modifications made to it, how I get on and off my zero-turn mower to mow the lawn. I will also include maintenance and repairs to a variety of things inside and out around my home. When I use the term I, for the most part I mean my ideas being put together with the help of my family, including my wife, and mostly a young man that helps me on Saturdays. I'm currently 70 years old. I've been married to my wife Teresa for over 52 years now. She is the love of my life and an excellent caregiver. We have 2 adult children, a girl and a boy, Wendy and Brad, and we also have 3 grandchildren, 2 girls and a boy. My nervous system was attacked by 2 syndromes, Guillain-Barré, otherwise known as GBS, and Miller-Fisher Syndrome, known by MFS. One of the differences between these two is that GPS starts at the feet and ascends, and MFS starts at the head and descends. So I'm going back to Saturday, September 9th, 2017. I had just turned 63 and was still working a full-time job. It was a very nice day. I spent the day at our daughter's house repairing some seals on windows. I returned home later in the afternoon, cleaned up, and had dinner, and sat down to watch some TV with my wife. At around 8 o'clock that night, Teresa asked me if I'd like a root beer float, and I said, sure, that sounds good. So she went ahead and made it up and sat it down there by me, and I picked it up to take a sip. And I had all I could do to get that sat back down, because that glass, just holding that glass, the coldness hurt my hand terribly. And when I took a swallow of it, that also hurt my mouth. So I sat it all back down, and I thought, that was strange. What was that all about? And so I didn't mention anything to Teresa about it. I thought, well, whatever it is, it'll go away. And so then later that night, I guess around 9:30 or so, Teresa decided she was going to go to bed. And I stayed up like I usually do. I usually watch some TV or news or something till 11, 12 o'clock at night. Well, she went off to bed, and I'm watching TV, and I fell asleep, which isn't uncommon. That would happen too. I'd fall asleep, and then I would usually wake up 11:30, 12 o'clock and get up and go to bed. Well, for some reason, I slept. I slept a long time. I slept till about, I would say, 4 in the morning. I really don't remember the actual time, but I'd say it's around 4 in the morning. And when I woke up, I really noticed how my face felt. I had this numbness in my face. And I thought, boy, that's weird. What's going on with me? And so then I got up. I was going to use the bathroom before I went upstairs. And then I was in there, and I thought, well, I'll say a few words to myself. And my speech sounded terrible. I never heard myself sound like that. It scared the heck out of me. I right away thought I was maybe having a stroke. I didn't know what was going on. So then I had to get myself upstairs, because we live in a 2-story house with the bedrooms all on the 2nd floor, to tell Teresa there's something wrong and we need to get to the hospital right away. I hated to do it, but I touched her and I shook her a little bit. I said, you gotta get up, we gotta go to the hospital. Well, that scared the heck out of her, I'm sure, and so then I laid down while she was getting ready, and just not feeling right at all. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is when I stood up to use the bathroom, I almost fell back down. My left leg almost gave out on me. So there was weakness there. But I did get upstairs all right. So then while Teresa's getting ready, she wanted to call an ambulance. I said, we live at rural, and it would be probably 20, 25 minutes for an ambulance to get here. And I said, no, that she's going to take me. And so anyway, she got ready and we left. The hospital's about 7 miles or 10, 15 minutes away. And so I got myself in the car, and I was still able to walk at that time. And then about halfway to the hospital, I started to notice that I wasn't able to swallow anymore. And I started drooling. I thought, well, that's weird too. And so then we got to the hospital and got inside the emergency room. And there was a couple people in the office registering to be checked. And at that point, I'd sat down, and I'm looking at the people, and they didn't look too awful sick to me, but I knew I had a major problem going on, so I kind of said out loud that I need to see somebody right away. And the receptionist got up, and she got a hold of a nurse right away, and they came out with a wheelchair. And I remember I was able to get in the wheelchair. And then she took me in the emergency room along with Teresa. So they're doing different kind of tests on me. Don't remember exactly what they all were. And at that time, Teresa was calling our two kids to come up, and wasn't long enough they were there. And I just could tell that I was continually getting worse. Now at this time, I was using a suction machine. They handed me, it's a Yankauer tip, it's called. It's attached to a hose. And I was able to put that in my mouth to suck the saliva out that I couldn't swallow. So I was continuously doing that. It's crazy how much, when you can't swallow, how much saliva you actually make. So anyway, after an hour or so, they really didn't know what was going on with me, and they weren't sure if it was a stroke or not. So then Teresa decided that she's going to get me to a level 2 care hospital. Somebody had a little more knowledge maybe. And so then I was transferred. It was about an hour ride away. And I remember the ride in the ambulance, how rough it was and how I needed to hold on to that tip and keep suctioning my mouth out. And I knew that I was getting worse. I really couldn't put a finger on it, but I just knew. I just didn't feel I was getting better, that's for sure. So when we got to the hospital, I told Teresa right away that it's worse. I'm not getting better. Because the ambulance attendant told her that she thought I was stable and nothing else was going on. So when I got to that hospital, they took me, they had a room ready for me, and they took me to that room. The hospital then had called a neurologist in, because they figured it was something that a neurologist needed to see. So anyway, he was brought in, and I remember being asked several questions, and it was a cognitive test they did on me. And I could tell myself I was getting just worse off. Now, it got to the point to where I was still suctioning myself, but then I started to lose my ability to speak. And then we had to resort to writing notes. I had to start writing notes, and now I thought, now I've got to kick this in gear and get some messages out to Teresa, what we needed to do, and that she needed to call my place of employment and tell them I wasn't going to be in the next morning. And there's lots of things. I went back and forth with her, and another thing I told her, I said that if I was put on a ventilator, that I didn't want to be on anymore in 2 weeks, and just to let me go. And so we transfer all that information back and forth to each other. And then I guess my eyes started to go. I was having trouble keeping my eyes open. And then I started to lose the maneuverability of my arms and my hands. And I slowly declined throughout the day. The doctor had me taken in for a couple tests. I had a spinal tap done, and to check for the antibodies in my blood. Well, it turned out that that got contaminated by blood. My blood evidently was in there, and so they couldn't do that test to get a result that they were looking for. And then they also did later in the day an MRI to see if I had any kind of bleedage going on inside my head. Maybe that wasn't much later. They might have done that a little sooner. Anyway, I was kind of out of it. I don't remember a lot. I think I kind of remember being in that MRI machine, I guess you call it, and needing to be very still. And at that point, I couldn't suction myself or anything anyway, but I just had to lay there and let the drool run out of my mouth. What a feeling that was, not knowing what was going on and just what was happening. Well, the MRI results showed that I did not have any kind of bleed in my head, so they ruled out a stroke. And my neurologist had seen cases like this before, and it took him a little while, and he finally told Teresa that he thought I was having a Guillain-Barré attack, or Guillain-Barré Syndrome was attacking my nervous system. He kind of explained to her how that was. So later that day, he did diagnose me as Guillain-Barré Syndrome with a Miller-Fisher variant. Both very, I would say, rare, very rare. We had never heard of Guillain-Barré before. Neither one of us, Teresa or myself, or my family. And he determined this because I did have a nagging cough several days before all this happened. So putting that together along with my symptoms, that's how he came up and determined that. So later that day, I had deteriorated enough to where my eyes were closed. I could no longer move anything. I was totally paralyzed. I was taken to ICU, and an intubation tube was put in for me to breathe. What that intubation tube is a longer tube that they insert through your mouth, down through your vocal cords, and into your lungs. Once they had done that, then they put me on a ventilator to breathe for me. The intubation tube also has a ring that kind of goes around it, and they can inflate it like a balloon. That seals off the space between the tube and your trachea, so you don't aspirate anything into your lungs. So being on the ventilator in intensive care, I've got to say that I didn't remember any of this because I'm sure they had put me on a medication to limit my gag reflex so I wouldn't reject the intubation tube.
Yeah.
He's going to want to see it.
Oh, okay. Move the paperwork here.
Oh, you're
How about that?
You're fine.
Yeah, he's fine.
So then for a few days, the first few days was kind of a battle with the nurses in intensive care. I would say for probably the first couple of weeks is touch and go. They didn't know if I was going to make it or not. My blood pressure, heart rate, breathing, body temperature, just kind of went crazy, up and down. Although my temperature, I believe, stayed pretty high because I didn't want anything on me other than a sheet. I was always hot. Well, the first thing I kind of remember that sticks out was September 16th. And that was the day a hurricane hit Puerto Rico. It's called Hurricane Maria. It was a Category 5 hurricane that devastated Puerto Rico. So I remember the news about that. 10 days later, after I was admitted to this hospital, it was decided that that intubation tube needed to come out and they would need to do a tracheostomy on me. And Teresa had decided, even though I had left her the message not to leave me on a ventilator, she had decided, because of what she had heard from the doctors, that people totally recover from GBS and MFS, that she decided that to go ahead and put me on a ventilator. So, like I say, it's about 10 days later, they took me into surgery, and the ventilator, or the tracheostomy, is when they cut a spot in your neck, and they put the tube in through there, and it's below your vocal cords, and then that tube goes down into your lungs. And it also has a balloon on it to seal off between the trachea and the tube. So the reason they had to do a tracheostomy on me is because that other tube could only be left there 10 to 14 days, and that's because if they didn't move it, it could cause permanent damage to your vocal cords. So that's the reason they went ahead and did the tracheostomy. At the same time, they had put a feeding tube in through the outside of my stomach, in through the wall, through my skin and into the wall of my stomach. And then they could hook that tube up to what they needed to feed me. Since I could no longer open my eyes and not move anything at all, they didn't know if I was aware or not after several days. So they did a brain scan on me to see if there was any activity, and the brain scan showed that I indeed had brain activity. So after that test, the neurologist came back in and started asking me to move things, see if I could move things. He started at my head and worked his way down. He found at the end of his asking questions that if I could move anything, he found that I could wiggle a toe on my left foot. And so that was great, because now they could communicate with me. They're able to ask me yes or no questions by wiggling my toe either once or twice. It sometimes took many questions to figure out what was going on with me. They could tell that I was aggravated sometimes because of my heart rate and blood pressure would go up some. So they'd start asking, I'd say 20 questions. Start at my head, and I'd wiggle once or twice, which it was it below or above? And then they'd start, if it's at my above, they'd start at my head and work their way down. Sometimes it was because I was hot and needed a washcloth on my head. Other times it was I needed to be turned, I was uncomfortable. Just things like that, things that you don't normally think of, a person laying there, but that's the kind of questions they'd ask me. And at least I was able to communicate with them at that time. I do remember constant suctioning of my mouth that was needed, and vivid dreams that I had. And I think a lot of that was due to the medication I was on. Well, the next thing I remember, date-wise, was October 1st, 2017, and that was a shooting at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing about this guy on top of a building shooting, that he had a clear view looking down and just shooting people. It was unbelievable. Anyway, that's kind of what I remember. Those things kind of stuck. So time went on. Much didn't change other than my blood pressure had more or less stabilized, and after a few weeks. And so I was no longer critical, I guess you'd say. I was more stable, in a stable condition. So around week number 4, the insurance company said that it was time for me to move. I would need to move to a lesser care facility, which also means a lesser expensive facility. In the facility that I'm in now, there were 1 to 2 patients per nurse, sometimes just one. I just would have one nurse at all time because of the condition I was in a few weeks earlier. Well, now the place that I'm going to next is going to be 7 patients to 1 nurse. So that equals lesser cost for the insurance company, naturally. But I'd still have to be moved to intensive care at the next facility. I remember when the insurance company said that Teresa needed to start to look at other places, they gave her some names to contact. And I do remember one that actually came to talk to Teresa in my room. So I kind of remember that conversation. And I believe they tried to take me off the vent at that time just to see if I could breathe. And I do remember that happened a few times. And I'll tell you what, when they take you off and you can't even begin to take a breath, how fast you feel that you're just going to die because you can't breathe. Well, they did that to me, and I remember that. So they knew that I wasn't ready to be taken off the ventilator once they took me there. Teresa decided what facility I was going to be transferred to, and that was about 30 minutes away. But before I could be transferred and admitted to this place, Teresa needed power of attorney to do so. So she was able to get a power of attorney through a toe wiggle. At the end of week number 5, I was transferred. My condition at this time is stable. I'm still on life support, can only wiggle my toe, and my eyes are still closed. We will pick up from this point in the next video. In the upcoming video, I will be including videos on me in these healthcare facilities, including sitting up for the first time at the edge of the bed, the use of the tilt table, and how I was transferred from bed to chair. Please click on the like and subscribe buttons below. This will help my channel grow. And thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.